Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid meets with Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry and announced a relief plan for the struggling Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Lebanon continuing to spiral. What is Israel doing to prepare for the worst? And finally, actual physical evidence that may corroborate the biblical stories found in the book of Judges. Following a meeting in Brussels between Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and his Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry, Israel is announcing that it will implement a series of relief measures for the Gaza Strip. Egypt has been mediating talks in Cairo between Israel and Hamas since the end of the 11-day conflict in Gaza in May. The relief plan including expanding the coastal enclave's fishing zone from 9 to 12 nautical miles, as well as approving additional imports and exports with the territory. Further, the plan calls for Qatar to continue monthly payments into the Strip to the tune of $30 million each. That's $10 million towards fuel purchases, $10 million towards assistance for families through Gaza's postal bank, and the rest for funding a Cash for Work program. Israel is, however, insisting on a change to the manner in which these hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid is being funneled into the region, announcing it will no longer permit the entrance of unmonitored cash. Instead, the Jewish state is demanding that an international observer, such as the United Nations, will facilitate the process to ensure funds are properly allocated, as opposed to falling into the hands of the Gaza terror groups like Hamas. Likewise, according to COGAT officials, these new relief measures will remain contingent on stability in the region, as well as on addressing the issue of the 4 Israeli captives currently being held by Hamas in Gaza. The 4 captives, including 2 Israeli citizens and the remains of 2 deceased IDF soldiers. Israel and Egypt have maintained a blockade on the Gaza Strip since 2007, when Hamas violently took control over the enclave. Moving now to the United States, over 2,000 participants joined outside Washington, D.C.'s Capitol building yesterday to rally against the recent rise in anti-Semitism that has struck across the Americas and abroad. This year, and particularly following the Israeli-Hamas conflict earlier in May, we've seen an alarming surge in anti-Semitic attacks, most recently including the stabbing of an Israeli rabbi in Boston. But while this weekend's rally highlights the nation's ability to come together to fight against hate, the event also showcases a massive disconnect between the American public support of Jewry and support of the Jews' homeland, Israel. The Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish National Fund, and many other right-leaning organizations sponsored the event and came out to show their support. Likewise, many speakers at the rally equated anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, explaining that they are one and the same. And Minnesota Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar was personally chastised for allegedly inspiring violence and prejudice against Jews across the country. J Street and other left-wing Jewish organizations, on the other hand, declined to co-sponsor the rally, citing political differences. Meanwhile, Meghan McCain, the daughter of the late Senator John McCain, had some words of inspiration to share as well, saying, quote, "We cannot be quiet, we cannot be silent, and first and foremost, above all else, we cannot be scared," end quote. The Phoenix-born, non-Jewish McCain then also expressing the importance of condemning the hate of all Jews, regardless of the individual's political affiliation, claiming that America is a nation built on equality for all and not on selective acceptance. In other news, Lebanon is on the brink of collapse, and the whole region is feeling it. In fact, with no working government, poverty spreading rapidly, and Iran trying constantly to take control, the fear of disruptive change can be practically cut with a knife.
בעניין לבנון, מדינת לבנון נמצאת על סף קריסה, כמו כל המדינות שאיראן משתלטת עליהן, והפעם אזרחי לבנון משלמים את המחיר. צריך להבין, אזרחי לבנון משלמים מחיר כבד בגלל ההשתלטות של איראן על המדינה. אנחנו עוקבים שם מקרוב אחרי המצב, גם שר הביטחון, שר החוץ ואנחנו נמשיך להיות דרוכים.
So is Lebanon about to lose control? How did the country fall to this level? And why can't the country pick itself up? Here with analysis is ILTV's Asaf Nissan. Asaf, it's great to have you back. So first of all, maybe just break down the situation. How bad is it on the ground in Lebanon, and what has the Lebanese government or the Lebanese public tried to do to address these issues?
So we're talking about a whole meltdown catastrophe. We're talking about poverty stricken in the streets. Over 35% of the country is living in the streets. Over 93% rise in murders in the past 2 years, ever since 2019, a 93 rate rise. And of course, we can't forget the explosion. We can't forget the problems that happened. And of course,
last year.
Exactly. With all that coming in hand, and the fact that there's no stable government on the table, there's nothing to do. The government, the country itself is on its way to a total breakdown.
Why has the government? I mean, speaking from Israel, it's funny to sit on this high horse, so to speak. But why is the government failing to come together?
It's not far off than the same problem we had here in Israel. Coalition. The problem is none of the parties are willing to sit with each other. And when we're talking about the parties, we're not talking about Likud or Yamina. We're talking about literal factions such as the Maronites, the Shiites, the Sunni, all the different parties in Lebanon that represent the whole different sect. They can come together and sit together. That's why also you see that there's no real relief effort. Each faction wants to take ownership and wants to take credit for the whole success.
All right, now I know you mentioned just now the explosion in the Beirut port in the summer of 2000. I understand that an investigation, or at least part of the investigation into that explosion, has now been blocked. Can you tell me about that?
So it's not exactly been blocked because they do know that the public was actually forsaken by the government, because officials did know there was a lot of ammonium nitrate sitting there in the port itself unhoused in a proper way for years. And that, of course, led to the fact that when the explosion erupted, it didn't just erupt in the local Beirut area also, but in the entire region. And thus creating the damage we're still seeing up to now, over billions of dollars still missing and still hurt from property damage. But the problem is that they do know that the officials are responsible, and they also have the name of the General Security Agency head that was Ibrahim, that is one of the people in charge, and they did ask to remove his immunity, but the courts decided on Friday, and the Interior Ministry decided it will not comply to it, because in the end of the day, they protect their own, I would say, and also to see the fact that they do want to keep it on, let's say, a more diplomatic level.
So how much of that frustration has been expressed in the street? Because I know that, especially with respect to Hezbollah, public outcry and public criticism is not always acceptable.
I mean, for the past 2 years, we've seen a lot of protests on the street, twice in 2020, that were calling for resignations of the government. Of course, that led to the current crisis that they're in with no successful government. But in addition, you see it in the streets when now the victims themselves are calling out for justice, are calling out to the government that forsaken them, and they're driving in the middle of a fuel crisis, which actually affects the whole country to a point where literally you don't see any electricity for 22 hours. But in the middle of that crisis, you do see those people still driving, still calling out, still protesting, because if not now, then who and when?
I mean, in addition to that, it sounds like there's really, it's like you said, it's really, if not now, when? Because, I mean, we're seeing reports of people waiting 3 hours or more in line just to get gas for their car, people resorting to violence.
And those subsidies, by the way, speaking of gas, a lot of the gas and food has been subsidized by the central bank, but even they are running out of funds. And the central bank itself called it an international crisis. I haven't seen one like that since 1850.
All right, so the whole world is watching very closely to see what's going on, especially within the region. Asaf Nissan, thank you so much for giving us some insights.
Thank you so much.
All right, first Mount Meron, then a synagogue in Givat Ze'ev, and now a bridge in Jerusalem. The next completely avoidable tragedy in Israel seemingly around the corner. Likud MK Miri Regev pleading for urgent construction work on the Mughrabi Bridge in Jerusalem, which connects the Western Wall to the Temple Mount in the Old City. Following the collapse of the original earthen ramp in 2004, the wooden Mughrabi Bridge was built in 2007. But it was meant to be a temporary solution, lasting just a few months until the construction of a permanent ramp could begin. The problem is that plans for a permanent structure quickly faltered under false accusations from the Islamic Jordanian Waqf, claiming that Israel was trying to destabilize the Temple Mount. So, sadly and dangerously, the Mughrabi ramp remains in use to this day. And this despite several orders to close the bridge outright due to safety concerns, including in reports from as early as 2011 and as recently as just last month. Regev is stressing that the bridge poses an extreme concern for those who use it and for the women who pray in the section just below it. Further, Regev is expressing particular urgency ahead of the Tisha B'Av holiday next week, which will likely see a huge influx of visitors at the site. Now, speaking of investigations, Israeli Justice Minister Gideon Sa'ar is proposing a new law banning the use of illegally obtained evidence. Known as the fruit of the poisonous tree law, Sa'ar is saying that in a properly functioning state, law enforcement must act within state law. Security services like the police and the Shin Bet, however, are slamming the proposition, saying that instating such a rule could put several investigations and even national security at risk. With us to discuss, then, is Professor Avi Bell, Faculty of Law at Bar Ilan University. Professor, thank you so much for being with us. First off, how do we collect evidence right now? And where is the line currently between obtaining something legally and illegally in Israel?
Well, this law wouldn't change anything about that process. There are certain guarantees in the law about, for example, before someone issues a confession, he has to have access to an attorney. Obviously, you cannot torture or impose undue pressure on a potential defendant. There are also rules about collecting physical evidence. You have to have a court order before you can take items. So all those things are already in the law. What Sa'ar's proposal does is it says, and it's a little bit less than he's pitching it at. He's describing this as a very far-reaching law. It's actually a very small law. He's suggesting that judges will have the discretion to disallow illegal evidence, and they will also have the discretion to continue using the illegal evidence to convict people.
Why would the police and the Shin Bet be against a bill like that? I mean, could it really be a threat to national security, as they allege?
No, I don't think so at all. Let's understand, there's already a procedure for dealing with cases where it's impossible to reveal the evidence to the defendant because, for example, someone is undercover and you can't reveal his identity, or other situations in which there's a problem with revealing the evidence in public. We have procedures by which the evidence can be revealed secretly in a sealed courtroom, or even where you avoid the criminal process altogether and you ask a judge to approve an administrative detention. So there's no reason whatsoever that we should worry about excluding these kinds of evidence this kind of evidence for a criminal procedure. And I think it's a shame that we don't have that the minister is not proposing a blanket exclusion of illegal evidence. Instead, he's proposing simply to ratify the existing situation and allow judges continue using it.
All right, well, this is a very serious situation, and I hope to have you back to discuss it more when we have more. Professor Avi Bell, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Moving on, a landmark moment for family rights in Israel. The High Court of Justice announcing on Sunday that all laws denying surrogacy rights from same-sex couples and from single men are unconstitutional. The dramatic decision to take effect within 6 months' time.
זה יום היסטורי לקהילת הלהט"ב בישראל, וזה יום היסטורי לחברה הישראלית כולה. זכות השוויון והזכות להורות קיבלו את המקום הראוי להן בסוגיה הקריטית של הקמת משפחה. אפליית זוגות חד-מיניים ואבות יחידנים תיפסק. זאת הייתה הפרה במשך שנים של ערכי היסוד של מדינת ישראל. וכן, גם לזוגות מאותו מין ולאנשים יחידים, אבות יחידים, גברים יחידים, יש זכות שלמה להיות הורים ולהקים משפחה בישראל באמצעות הסדר פונדקאות.
An 11-year legal battle finally ending. and surrogacy rights being extended to single Israeli men and Israeli same-sex couples. The fight starting in earnest in 2010 with a petition to the court by Itai Pinkas Arad and his partner Yoav Arad Pinkas. Additionally, the latest ruling follows a high court decision in February 2020, which gave the Knesset a one-year deadline to pass a new, indiscriminate surrogacy law. Until now, partnering with a surrogate in Israel was an option only available to heterosexual couples and to single mothers, provided the single mom's own eggs were used in the surrogacy. In any case, though, the deadline has come and gone. So last week, the state requested that the court advance its decision ahead of September. And voila, the ban on LGBTQ or single-father surrogacy is now set to lift in half a year, the 6-month period meant to give government offices time to adjust to the new ruling. And both the Israeli petitioners, the LGBTQ community, and the health minister, openly gay Meretz party leader Nitzan Horowitz, are applauding the decision as cleaning a stain from Israel's robust legal system.
זה הישג אדיר של הקהילה הגאה, ובראשה אנשים מסורים, כמו שני האנשים האלה, בני זוג, איתי פינקס ויואב ארד, חברים שלי, שהגישו את העתירה הזאת לפני שנים, ונאבקו כנגד מה שנראה קושי בלתי עביר, כנגד כל הסיכויים.
אנחנו באמת מתרגשים גם בשם הקהילה הגאה, אבל אני חושב שההחלטה הזאת והמהלך, כל הדרך הזאת, 12 השנים שעברו מאז שהתחלנו לצעוד בה, הביאו היום לתוצאה שהיא מאוד חשובה. היא חשובה לא רק למי שעשויים ליהנות ולהביא ילדים לעולם, אלא בעיניי כל מקום בספר החוקים שמפלה אותנו אפליה שרירותית, בין אם זה הקהילה הגאה או בין אם זה כל קבוצה אחרת, זה כתם על ספר החוקים של מדינת ישראל, וכל יום שכתם כזה נמחה הוא יום חג למדינה, הוא יום חג לחברה שלנו.
Now for more news to celebrate, we have some new fantastic events and attractions to share with you. But with us to discuss via Zoom from the UK is TV host and content creator Liran Notik. Liran, it's so great to see you, even though you're so far away from us. But I understand that you have two very special mentions for us today. Start us off with the first.
Yeah, first of all, you surprised me, guys, with the new surrogacy item. I am so thrilled. So congrats to Israel for this amazing revolution. Crossing my fingers to be the next one to come to have surrogacy. Who knows? So yeah, we have a very special 2 spots today on our cultural segment. So start right away with David Shaul, which is a rising star in Israel, both actor and artist, music artist. So first, let's have a small glimpse from his music video, and we'll talk about it right later.
All right, now I haven't seen too much from this music video, but I know that every actor and musician in it looks very comfortably dressed.
Well, he's a biblical music video having there. But so first of all, David Shaul, people might know him already because right now on screens on the big cinemas in Israel, we have the blockbuster movie called The Shacheret Shuli, and David Shaul is the lead role, playing alongside with Shlishiat Makashur. Now he's also having his music career alongside, and you can find more about him on social media, Instagram and Facebook, and support him because I'm sure he's gonna have a lot of new music concerts to come. So find out about that. And he's certainly giving you the vibes of Coverate, if you know, Aaron. Maybe you have heard about Coverate band before.
No? Unfortunately, well, that's why we have you.
Well, Coverate is a very well-known band from the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And so David Shaul is a young artist who's inspired by this eclectic music, Israeli vibes. So go ahead, have a nice support in David Shaul, in his music videos, with his social media, and follow him on the next future place to come. Now, we're moving on to our big theater because, as you know, Aaron, I always love to have some balance in life, right? We have the comedy theater. Now, the comedy theater, I didn't know that. I know the play that I'm going to talk about, which is מחוברים לחיים, but I didn't know it is actually an adaptation for a very well-known blockbuster, French comic called Untouchable. So first of all, let's have a small glimpse from the original movie.
Allez, c'est un anniversaire, on danse là! Allez, bougez-vous un peu! C'est l'anniversaire de Philippe! Voilà, Igor! C'est bien, Albert!
So I know this film, and I love this film. I'm very excited to hear about the
Now, here's a test for you, Aaron.
Oh, no.
I'm going to test you a little bit because we're going to see right now the adaptation scene, the same scene on stage. Let's have a small glimpse. So what we have just watched is the exact same scene from the original movie, just with this adaptation on stage. Now, Akamari did this amazing, courageous step. For those who doesn't know the movie and the play, it's all about the wealthy, high-prestige, paralyzed man who needs a caregiver. And Shlomo Goza, we're seeing right now, he's gonna play that role on stage as a caregiver. Now, the problem is that he's not a professional one. He just released from jail. He's an African absent. He just came out from jail and sort of bumped into this career with no whatsoever connection. And it's a very amusing comedy with lots of fun, excitement, friendship on stage. Go watch it. There is lots of tickets to buy on a comedy theater. It starts again from August the 26th and on. And I just can't wait for you to watch it and tell me all about it.
Well, I think that it'll be very interesting to watch, especially now knowing that the actor has a history that, at least in part, really mirrors some of the growth plot or the arc of the original characters in the film. It's going to be really interesting to see how this goes. Liran, thanks so much for sharing about it.
Well, thank you guys so much, and I'm going to see you next time with lots of new high spots.
See you next week. And our final story tonight, an exceptionally rare glimpse into ancient history. A shard from a clay vessel that may have belonged to the famous Gideon of the biblical book of Judges. For the first time ever, Israeli archaeological experts are revealing an inscription that both refers to the biblical book of Judges and dates back to that same time. In fact, the artifact in question may have even belonged to the famous judge Gideon, aka Yerubal. A shard from a ceramic jug inscribed with the name Yerubal was discovered at the Kirbat Erai site in the Shahariar forest of the KKL JNF. And the shard, dating back to around 1100 BCE, or over 3,100 years ago, perfectly aligns with the First Iron Age, as well as the time of Judges as described in the Bible. In addition, this is the first time in history that the name Yerubal has been found outside of the Bible and in an archaeological context.
זאת פעם ראשונה בארכיאולוגיה של ארץ ישראל, שיש לנו כתובת ברורה מהתקופה שנקראת ברזל אחד, שהיא בעצם תקופת השופטים. עד היום אם נמצאו כתובות מתקופה זו, הייתה בהם אות או שתיים או מין טקסט לא ברור. וכאן פעם ראשונה לנו שם שאפשר להבין אותו, והשם הוא ירובעל. ירובעל מופיע במסורת המקראית כשמו השני של גדעון, אחד השופטים.
Of course, when working with artifacts of this age, nearly everything is an educated guess, and the geographical context in which the shard was discovered lends credence to the theory of coincidence. Professors Garfinkel and Ganor explaining that the name Yerubal was evidently in common usage at the time, and so while the owner may have been the very same Gideon as mentioned in the Bible, this inscription may just as easily be referring to another Yerubal. The judge Gideon is first mentioned in the Bible as fighting against idolatry, and he's most often remembered for his triumph against the Midianites. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.28 shekels to the American dollar and 2.63 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.